So, Twilight. The book that somehow managed to define an entire generation while also being a punchline to every joke about young adult fiction for the next 20 years. I don't think there's another series quite like it. You couldn't escape it. If you walked into a bookstore in 2008, there was Twilight. If you walked into Tesco's, Twilight, WH Smith's, airports, Waterstones, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, somebody's mother was reading Twilight. Someone's older sister was reading Twilight. Half your school or college was probably reading Twilight while pretending they weren't. It was absolutely everywhere. Every publisher looked at the success and collectively decided, right, black cover, flowers, red ribbon, girl in a dress, maybe an apple, maybe a feather. Every supernatural romance for about 5 years looked like it had been cloned from the same laboratory. It's genuinely hilarious looking back. Now, before anyone asks, yes, I bought the beautiful 20th anniversary editions. Every single one. And it's not because I suddenly think Twilight is secretly the greatest work of literature ever written. I bought them because they reminded me of Emma. I've talked about Emma before, where I did a whole deep dive into the series, and I'll leave that video in the pinned comments because it's probably one of the most personal things I've ever made. We used to read those books together. Well, more accurately, we used to read them while taking the absolute piss out of them. Then we'd immediately read another 100 pages. That's the kind of Twilight experience you spend half the time laughing and somehow still end up emotionally invested. When Emma died, I inherited her copies of the whole saga. Everyone covered in little notes, post-its, scribbles in the margins. Those books aren't really Twilight anymore, they're conversations, they're memory. They're about 20-year-old jokes frozen in time, which makes reading them now, those editions, feel very strange. And let's just get something out the way immediately. The writing isn't brilliant. Some of the dialogue genuinely made me pause the audiobook just to recover. There are lines that I found myself staring into the middle distance and thinking, Stephenie, who's possessed you? And if I have to hear the word topaz one more time, I'm going to throw myself in the nearest river. Nobody has ever described eyes that much, not before Twilight and not after Twilight. Just pages and pages of topaz, liquid topaz, burning topaz, golden topaz, sparkling topaz. I get it. The man has expensive looking eyeballs. Move on. But this is where I have to give Stephenie Meyer credit, because she actually does something remarkably well. Folks. The setting, the forest, the rain, the atmosphere, the mountains disappearing into the mist, the constant grey skies. I genuinely think those descriptions are beautiful. There's something incredibly cozy about them. You can almost feel damp reading them. It's very atmospheric, which is probably accurate for Washington State. So you absolutely see why people wanted to live there after Twilight. Then they actually get there and the rain, realise it rains sideways. But the descriptions genuinely hold up. It actually very beautiful. The other thing that surprised me during the reread is how sincere the book is. Not good, not subtle, definitely not subtle, but sincere. There's absolutely no catharsism in Twilight. Stephenie Meyer completely commits to every emotion Bella is feeling, and that's actually quite rare now, because here's the thing adults often forget. Being a teenager is ridiculous. Everything feels like life or death. You just don't fancy someone. You're convinced your entire future depends on whether they look at you during maths. If you don't text back for 3 hours, if they didn't, your brain immediately assumes they've either died or they hate you. There's no middle ground. Every crush feels like destiny. Every breakup feels like the apocalypse. Everything is enormous. Everything matters. Twilight captures that intensity unbelievably well. Not realistically. Emotionally, that's a different thing. Does Edward have some questionable habits? Yes, very. The man watches Bella sleep. Which, no, absolutely not. If someone... I know this is a film thing, but I know if someone climbed through the window, I would be ringing the police, not falling in love. That relationship has issues, quite a few issues. Enough issues to fill several therapy sessions, but underneath all the supernatural absurdity, there's something recognisable. That feeling of believing one person has become your entire universe. That's teenage love. It isn't balanced, it isn't healthy, it isn't rational, it's dramatic. And teenagers are dramatic. I was, you probably were, we all were. And I think people sometimes judge Twilight for being exactly what it set out to be. It's not trying to be high literature, it's not trying to reinvent vampires or become Dracula. It's trying to capture that obsessive first love, and somehow, despite everything, it absolutely did. I also don't think people appreciate how influential those books were. You can laugh at Twilight all you want. Every publisher copied it. BookTube owes Twilight more than people want to admit. Those entire early YouTube discussions, book blogs, forums, fan edits. Reading vlogs before reading vlogs existed. Twilight fandom helped build the internet book culture, alongside John Green for the first few years. It created readers who wanted to sit online and spend hours talking about books. That's basically what most of us still do, just with slightly better microphones and cameras that don't make you look like you're, I don't know, on a Zoom meeting in 2001. Zoom didn't exist in 2001. Skype, dear God. Then you've got Life and Death. Twilight reimagined. Stephenie Meyer's naming conventions remain questionable. Not every title has to sound like someone dramatically staring out the window. But I actually really enjoy it still. Mostly because it trims so much of the original. It's tighter, it's more focused, and it ends very differently. It feels much like its own thing. It's still ridiculous as hell, still melodramatic, still full of people making incredible life decisions, but weirdly it works. Then arrived Midnight Sun. I genuinely think is the better novel, I really do. It's better written. Edward's internal monologues are completely exhausting. And I mean that, exhausting. Which makes sense because the poor guy spends the entire book having existential crises. But Stephenie Meyer's writing has clearly improved by then. It's more confident, it's much stronger writing, and this is probably controversial. I actually think she writes male characters better than female ones. Edward is infinitely more interesting from inside his own head than he ever was through Bella's narrative. He's completely crazy. Still wants to eat the girl. Still spends time, far too much time brooding, but somehow he's more rounded. I just wish my friend Emma could have been around to read it, because we would have absolutely lost it laughing. It would have been a nice way to spend 2020. There would have been voice notes, messages at 2 in the morning, and probably arguments over which bits were unintentionally hilarious. But that's the thing grief does. Sometimes you don't miss the big moments, you miss laughing at vampire books together. Rereading Twilight again this year, I realised I wasn't really revisiting a novel, I was revisiting an era. An entire period of my life. The books, the films, the memes, the endless Team Edward and Team Jacob debates, people wearing Edward hoodies, every supermarket selling Twilight merchandise. It's like opening a time capsule, and maybe that's why I don't really enjoy how people look at YA now, because I genuinely think a lot of modern YA isn't really written for teenagers anymore. It's written for adults who happen to buy YA. You can feel it. The marketing, the expectations, the endless conversations around spicy stuff. I'm sorry. I still think reading explicit content in books marketed for teenagers is bizarre. Teenagers don't need books desperately trying to prove how mature they are. Sometimes they need books that understand what 17 feels like. Twilight understands that completely. It's messy. Sometimes completely unintentional, but honest. So, are these brilliant supernatural novels? No. Are they literary masterpieces? Definitely not. Is the dialogue and internal monologues occasionally painful? Absolutely. Would someone please hide the word topaz from Stephenie Meyer, for everyone's sake? But are they sincere? Yes, beautifully sincere. And sincerity has become surprisingly rare. Irony is easy. Being cynical is easy. Rolling your eyes at everything is easy. Twilight never does that. It believes every emotion, every longing stare, every dramatic declaration, every impossible romance, and somehow it still works. Maybe that's why people are still talking about these books 20 years later. They're not perfect, far from it. But I think it's because they remind people of who they were. Their first crush, their first fandom, their first online friends, the first series that completely consumed their brain. And if I'm being completely honest, if someone handed me a time machine tomorrow, I wouldn't use it to change anything important. I'd probably go back to sitting on the sofa with Emma reading Twilight, laughing at every ridiculous line before immediately turning the page to find out what happened next. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes a book doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes it just has to remind you of who you were. And for all the glittering vampires and questionable relationships, and enough mentions of topaz to bankrupt a jewelry store, Twilight still does it better than most books ever written, capturing that feeling of being young and in love and stupid. I'm Darv James. If you want to go deeper, early access, you're welcome to check out Substack and Patreon and channel memberships. Leave a comment, hype this video, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. And don't worry, I might look impossibly young, but I don't sparkle in sunlight.